Welcome back to another episode of Real Results. I'm your host, Coach Joe Villegas. This is the program where we help you to improve your health, increase your wealth, and live a more fulfilling life. And with me, I have a very special guest today. He's a fitness and strength coach, the 2016 winner of the World Strongman Junior Championship. He's also a real estate agent and a friend. Welcome to the show, Nick Hadge. Nick, how we doing, brother?
Joe, how's it going? Awesome to be here. Great, thank you.
Yeah, awesome. The pleasure's all mine. So I gotta share up front, Nick, with the viewers how we actually first met. I don't know if you would remember this, but my first strongman competition in 2016, I remember walking in the room, and for those who are uninitiated in the sport know that there's a lot of big people that attend these things and compete, and I remember looking across the room and seeing you just dominating and going, who is this guy? Like, I've got to meet him. And at the at the end of the competition, I walked up to you. There's a bunch of guys kind of crowded around just asking you questions and stuff. And I remember you said something that resonated with me immediately, and I think it was not quite what the other people expected, but I got it as soon as you said it. They said, like, Nick, you know, how do I advance? What's the secret? How do I get good at strongman? That kind of stuff. And your answers always stuck with me. You said, you have to become a technician in the movements. You didn't mention anything about food or supplements or even training programs or anything. You said you need to get your technique right, and that's how you can advance. So that's always stuck with me. I had to share that with you, at least on our episode, to kind of kick things off, but I've always appreciated that and kept it with me through my training as I've gone through.
I love that. Honestly, I'm pumped you remember that. I don't remember that exact moment, but that 100% sounds like something that I would say. And I honestly still stand by that in a lot of ways, especially in the strongman world. Mm-hmm. It is incredibly specific, you know? So if you want to get good at the specific things, you just have to master them, become a technician for the exact movement, and really dial in on that specificity.
Exactly. And I think, too, it's a theme that comes up in a lot of episodes on my show here is like, sticking to the fundamentals of whatever it is you're trying to do. If you want to advance financially, if you want to advance, you know, in your physical body, spiritually, whatever, in your relationships, there are certain kind of basics and fundamentals that you need to respect, right, and need to adhere to in order to get to where you want to go. And I think for our episode today, I mean, we're really going to focus on building physical strength and how you do that, because you are someone who is an expert at that, and I would love to be able to share more of these really cool insights with the viewers as well. But Nick, maybe just to get started, would you mind sort of sharing, you know, your journey in the physical culture and how you got your start and came up to where you are today?
I'll make it quick because it's been a crazy journey. I'll make it as quick as I can. Growing up, I was never your typical sports athlete. Mm-hmm. My brother was. He was, you know, like played every sport, did all that. I was always a little bit overweight, so I always kind of like tapped out for football. And I liked weird things. Like I played the drums. I did boxing, karate, the alternative ways of movement. Right. I got to high school and they were like, you're so big, we're forcing you to play football. I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to do this, I need to, you know, get in the weight room and, you know, slim down a little bit. In the 7th grade, I was 230 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah, big boy always.
Yeah.
And I was blessed. My father is a really good friend. Does a lot of coaching with Patriots players.
Wow.
So early on, I had amazing coaching. And then really training for football, I found for high school is when I found my love for movement, my love for strength. My brother and I trained together. We became best friends during that. From there, I was like, this is what I'm going to do. Went to school for exercise science, got into strongman. Somehow I found another amazing set of coaches to guide me. I've always kind of been the younger brother that had amazing resources. Right. Amazing coaches, amazing facilities. I was kind of always spoiled, but I knew that. So I took advantage of it, right? So I did whatever I could. I said, I'm going to go to the school, learn under these people, you know, Pat Davidson at the time, right. Andrew Triana, my coach and my best friend now. Yeah. And it's been history from there. I've been competing for 10 years.
It's crazy how it flies by. Fill us in a little bit too, Nick, on like some of your lifts to give people an idea of like benchmarks that you've hit. Because I know, you know, for the most part what you've done in terms of your capability, but for people who maybe don't know or haven't seen you lift quite yet, just give us some basic numbers of major lifts that you've hit.
Um, Everybody says like, "What's your bench
Yeah,
press?"
right.
I don't bench press, believe it or not. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing to do.
Sure.
It's amazing for all sports and strength. It's just not
Yes.
a part of my thing. But I mean, I've put 400 pounds over my head. I've deadlifted 900 pounds for like moving with weight on my back, over 1,000 pounds on the yoke.
Yep.
The one arm dumbbell press, I've put 265 pounds overhead.
Wow.
So those are a couple of my bigger numbers.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think it clearly makes you an authority on the subject of building strength for sure. So an amazing journey up to this point. I know there's a lot of lessons we can share with viewers, but maybe we start, like we said before, with the basics, the fundamentals. So let's say somebody comes into this episode, they're watching, they say, hey, I want to get in the gym, I want to get stronger, maybe work my physique a little bit, but strength's really where it's at. What would you advise somebody to do who's just getting started?
Have patience and aim for the long run. If you're just getting started, you shouldn't think, I'm going to bench or I'm going to increase my numbers X amount super soon. You need to think, I'm in this for life.
Yep.
I need to learn my body. Once you learn your body and really put the work in, by the time you actually can master things, you'll look back and everything you wanted will already be there.
Yeah.
But if you just sit there and say, when am I going to get it? When am I going to get it? It's going to feel like forever. And then you're going to get frustrated and you're going to fall off. So I would just say, enjoy the journey. And that's where it all happens.
100%. Do you know Rob Orlando, Nick? Are you familiar with Rob?
Ooh, I know that the name sounds really familiar. I'm sure I would.
Yeah, he's in like the Bridgeport, Stanford area, but he brought Strongman to CrossFit. And that's actually where I got my start in coaching. So my first exposure was at Rob's Strongman seminar, and he said something too that stuck with me. He said, look, like, this is not a 6-week program, this is not a 12-week cycle. He's like, strength is a lifetime. Like, this is, like you just said, it's a forever thing. And I've told clients this too, where like, if you can just take your time horizon and push it out as far as you possibly can, it also alleviates a lot of that mental pressure, right? You don't have this like crazy deadline of, I have to, bench this much by this time or squat that much by that time. It's like, look, wherever I am right now is totally fine because I know my ultimate goal is so far out that I just got to keep plugging away and eventually I'll get to where I want to be. And like you said, one day you look up and next thing you know, all where you wanted to be is right here, right? So that patience is absolutely key. So going from there, like, I guess what would you say is next? Like, maybe get into more of the mechanical stuff, like, hey, compound movements, maybe some isolation stuff. Like, what would you begin to recommend to a newbie, a beginner?
Honestly, I would have fun and play and do a little bit of everything. I would pick a program and stick to it, though. So I do recommend that. You want to play and you want to do a little bit of everything, but you also want to have a specific, like set of things that you want to excel at.
Yeah.
So like pick a few things to think, I'm going to get really good at these few things. Get good at those two things, then move on. Because too often you can do a lot of different exercises, but never actually stick to something. And, that's half of it is actually complying with a program. And like I said, mastery of movements. Yeah. So start from the ground up. Compound lifts are great. I think you should have a little bit of every type of exercise. Like you want your compound, you want your isolation, but split them up a little bit and only have, you can run it in like small cycles. Like for me personally, I think it really works one day at a time. On this specific day, only isolation movements. Yeah. On this specific day, only compound movements. So you want a little bit of all. You can't just only do strength or only do cardio. You need to be well-rounded, but you need to stick to it. So it sounds like a lot, but that's because it kind of is. It really is kind of a lot of demand that you need to actually see results.
Absolutely. And it's funny. So like you're saying, it is a lot. It can be overwhelming for somebody who's new. There's actually a concept I talked about on another episode where I picture it like a 3-legged stool, right? If you're just beginning and you don't know what to do, you have to have 3 things. One is the knowledge to program for yourself, understand what you're doing, the time to be able to put that together, and the desire. So if you have all those 3 things, you're off to at least a good start. But if you're missing one of those, that stool's gonna fall over. And I would highly advise somebody to reach out to someone like yourself, like someone who's more than walked the walk, who knows what they're doing, and can say, look, I have, like you, Nick, have the knowledge, you have the time because this is what you do, and you totally have the desire because this is your life. So you have all those stuff. You've jumped over all these hurdles already. Hey, here's a program that can work for you. I understand where you are, where you want to go. This is where to begin. So if you're watching this right now and you decide like, hey, I actually don't know what I'm doing, or I really don't want to take the time to put this together, you got to reach out to somebody like Nick who knows this stuff and has walked the path for sure. So Nick, I think this is a great place to start. Now, I would love to know, what are some obstacles you've run into? Maybe some hard lessons that you've learned along this strength path.
I think kind of going back to something I already said with like to have patience, that was a hard thing for me to learn. Like I only say that you need to have patience and plan for the long run because I learned that myself the hard way.
Yeah.
I came into college thinking, way back in 2012, and I was thinking, oh, I'm strong. I was a strong, but I got humbled and I got put through that test of, okay, you need to pretty much throw out what you think you know and relearn from the ground up. And for me, that was not an easy thing. I was a freshman in college thinking I was strong and all that. And it's like, we need to rewrite who you are.
Yeah.
And that comes around in cycles and phases. So even now where I'm at in my strongman or my strength career, no matter what personal records I get to, I'm going to come back to that training cycle where it's like, start from square one again, buddy, where it's like, humble yourself and start from square one all over again. It might not be the same square one. You might be more equipped and more smart, more experienced, but you're always going to have to restart that cycle of training from the ground up.
Yeah, I love that. And actually recently I just started a whole new cycle of training, and I remember thinking like the second or third day, I'm like, body's hurting, I'm sore, it's different, I'm uncomfortable, but I've got all these lessons I've accumulated in the last 10 or 12 years. Like I kind of know what's coming next to some degree, right? And I understand like, okay, the pacing of this is where it needs to be. I'm all right, I'll do some recovery work, I'm fine. No need to panic, right? You can use those things that you've learned going forward. So I guess when you do your fitness and strength work with your clients, Nick, like you said, the focus is kind of dabbling on a lot of different things. How do you balance all of that in the week? You said maybe one day is just your compound stuff, one day is just isolation. Are you usually sticking to that sort of breakdown for folks? So like, how do you get them in a well-balanced program and approach?
That's a great question. It depends on the client, and the answer is it depends, which is not the best answer, but it's the truth.
Yeah.
It depends on who the client is and where they're at, what are their needs, and what are their goals, right? Where are they now? Where do they want to be? And I think a big part of it is meeting the client where they're at, and then reverse engineering, find where they're at, where do they want to be, in reverse engineering, how are we going to actually get there?
Right.
That's going to determine the exact spread and the exact specifics of the program. We can have these ideas that we want it to be as well-rounded as possible, but what does that mean for a person who's biased in this way and needs this and that? So it's always going to depend on who they are and where they're trying to go and their timeline and a million other specifics.
Absolutely. And I think, for those watching, like, it's one thing to go download an app, like AI is the big thing right now, but you're never going to beat the human feel and experience, right? You have someone like Nick who's an expert who says, hey, actually, wait a minute, you worked 10 hours yesterday, maybe that stress you've accumulated, maybe today's not the best day to test your deadlift, right? Like we need to kind of rethink what we're doing and pivot, audible, that kind of deal. So I think that's huge. In order to have an effective program, it has to be one that's tailored to the individual and take in as many of those aspects as humanly possible. So I want to shift gears a little bit. I know we're coming to the break soon, but I think a big piece of this, Nick, and you would agree, right, is you can get to where you want to go in terms of your goal. You can do the perfect training program, but if you're not taking care of the other 23 hours of the day, in other words, you're not focusing on your food, you're not focusing on your sleep, like you're going to have a really hard mountain to climb. And I want to touch on some of that with you. I see some of your posts on social media sometimes, like prepping chicken and all these things. I'd like to kind of hear from you, like what are sort of your pillars as far as nutrition goes, the basics that people should be following if they want to be successful in building strength?
Of course, and these things are super important. And that's actually why for my clients, everyone runs something their own way, but I actually do weekly check-ins. And because I need to know these things.
Yes.
I need to know how they're feeling, how's their last week, what's their next week look like? Is work going to kick them in the teeth? Like how bad is your life going to be?
Right.
And have those same things for myself. You have to plan accordingly. But it's like, no matter how bad things get, you have to have your staples, like you said, your pillars. And then for me, it's like, okay, what are going to be some pillars that are going to be there for even the most busy person with the most messed up schedule?
Right.
It's like, okay, let's try and think. For the most part, unless, whatever, you're going to have a wake up time. When you wake up, I do X, Y, Z. It's kind of like, I like to find times you can't run from. You can't run from wake up time. You can't run from going to sleep time.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm trying to corner myself even. I have that like mentality where it's like, I don't want to make any excuses, corner yourself.
Right.
And pre and post training. So I call it bookends of your days and bookends of your exercise or your workout or whatever stressor, work, whatever your thing is, just manage the bookends. Yeah. So no matter what, when I wake up, X, Y, Z, like I recommend people drink a little bit of water, wait a little bit, and then have their first meal, however it's going to go. And then same thing for the night, that you just know you're not going to miss those things. And then the accountability comes into play. You have to be real with yourself with that.
Yes. Yeah, accountability is huge, right? You can have the perfect plan, but if you're not going to do it, right? And I think most folks have a very hard time keeping themselves accountable, so having a third party is huge. I think also some of it too, and I've seen this a lot, like I've been up to Lightning to train with Andy a little bit. I mean, not a whole lot, but sparingly. But I think a lot of it too is like the peer group that you're around. When I see some of the videos you put up, I mean, the energy in that gym has to be just electric with all you guys putting up big weights. You're all cheering each other on regardless of what they're lifting, right? It could be a warm-up set, but that support is there. That plays into the accountability factor as well. So if you're at home watching this, like, you got to get yourself into a strong environment, no pun intended, but one that's going to help you to be successful in what you're trying to do. And I love that concept, Nick, too, of the bookends. Like, you can't escape the fact of, luckily, right, that you're going to wake up in the morning and you're going to have a bedtime. How do you handle those two pieces? And then also, too, is how you handle your time beginning and end of your training. And I think that really can set folks up easily to have a good routine. Is there anything like in the morning, you said just get hydrated, anything else you suggest folks to do kind of first thing in the morning to set the day up well?
Again, I know this is a terrible answer, but it does depend, right? Like I know, for example, for myself, I have a hard time getting in a big meal first thing in the morning. Okay. Some people don't have a hard time with that. So for me, what I do is I have a protein shake. I have my MCT, so I have my healthy fats in that protein shake, a couple cracks of pink sea salt, and I have my protein. And I know within 60 to 90 minutes, since liquid nutrition is more easily digestible, I'm going to be hungry, right? I don't have any carbs with that shake. It's protein, a little bit of fat, and that stimulates my appetite for the day. So I know that I need to plan what my next meal is going to be after that. But so that's, play it off of your personality. What are your tendencies as a human, and what is your day going to be like? What is your day ahead of you going to set you up for, and how do I eat to prepare for that?
100%. And I think what's great about that too is if you aren't sure, work with a coach, right? Your coach can help you to set that up and figure it out. And it's not like a hard and fast thing, right? Like I'm sure you have this with clients all the time, or even yourself. I know I've had it with myself, where like that morning routine can change. There can be some flexibility. I know for me, like I like to get up, I like to take care of my son, get him off to daycare. I like to go for a little walk, kind of get my head in the right spot, do some gratitude, things like that. But you gotta be able to pivot, and you gotta be able to evolve as times change. So Nick, I know we're getting into some cool topics here. I wanna continue this. We're gonna take a quick break from our sponsors. When we get back, Nick's gonna continue to share all these awesome insights and distinctions. Hey, it's Coach Joe here, and I wanna thank you for checking out this episode of Real Results. Since becoming a coach over a decade ago and getting to help tons of people make incredible transformations, I've made it my mission to find the most effective tools to help people change their health and ultimately their life. As a thank you for watching this episode, I've created a series of free mini courses, downloads, and resources that you can use to create real change in your life. Simply click the link in the description or head over to www.resultswithjoe.com and click on the free resources tab. All you have to do is sign up using your best email address, and you'll have access to all the resources straight away so you can start to create real change in your life. I look forward to seeing you on the inside, and let's enjoy the rest of this episode. Welcome back to Real Results. Again with me today, I've got my dear friend and super strong strongman athlete, Nick Hadge. Nick was getting into all sorts of amazing insights around building strength. how do we get our diet right? How do we get our mind right about programming and training? And Nick, you've got a very unique definition of what strength is and how to approach strength. And I'd love to kind of kick back off with that. So could you please share your approach as to how you define strength?
Of course, I'd love to. It's definitely non-traditional, I think. People see 100 pounds and they think that that's, it is what it is. It's either going to be easy or it's going to be difficult to lift that 100 pounds. And that's not really the case. Being strong is the way you interact with the task at hand, and can you accomplish that task at hand? And that comes down to a lot of specificity. So again, going back to the 100 pounds, right? We could have a 100-pound dumbbell, and I could just pick it up off the ground. And it's nice because there's a handle there. I can grab the handle with my hand, all that sort of stuff. But if you give me a 100-pound sandbag, and you say, pick up that 100 pounds, still 100 pounds, but it's not going to feel the same. It might feel way more difficult, or it could be easier depending on how I approach the task. So it's about how you interact with the thing. And I talk about that a lot with my athletes. Is interaction is key, especially when it comes to strongman. If you go to interact with a log press the same way you interact with a barbell, you're not going to have a great outcome. Those two implements are shaped very differently. You have to utilize the shape of the thing, and you have to think about the task at hand and how am I going to get this task done given the shape in given time and space. And it's kind of interesting. It's when you look at exercise and training like that, it just gives you an entire new lens to look at everything. And it's kind of how the circus came about. It's like, here's this awkward thing. Let me move through time and space around it. And, I said earlier, I've pressed overhead a 260-pound dumbbell. That was strongman style with using my legs and all that. I can't just sit here and go like this with 265 pounds.
Right.
No, I'll never be able to do that.
Right.
But it was how I interacted with the implement, and I used my legs and I moved around it, and then I locked it out and I stood up with the thing. It's interaction, right? So if you learn how to properly interact with something, you'll be like, wow, that was much easier than I thought it was. All these things that look scary and that I don't think I could ever do, I can do it because I interacted different. I approached it different. I put my hands on it. It was a different experience. And I love that because I see everyday people doing things and they're like, what just happened? I just lifted that stone. I just lifted that log. Right. And I'm like, yeah, you did. You did that. And that's cool to me.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that definition. I love that lens to look through for sure. I mean, obviously in the sport of strongman, and for those who are watching maybe aren't familiar, it's not just picking up barbells and dumbbells. You're picking up awkwardly shaped things like literal rocks, cars, sandbags, stones, things like that. So you have to be able to adapt to the implement itself. But also too, Nick, I think which is great about your approach is it's functional. Because if you're in your backyard doing yard work or playing with your grandkids, they're not shaped like barbells and dumbbells. You have to be prepared for the thing you're interacting with. And I think that really sets people up well to understand their environment and how they can interact, be not only successful in their lifting, but be safe, right? You talk about that longevity in the beginning. How do you get that longevity out? You can't, it's like, all you have is a hammer, everything's a nail, right? You kind of need to be able to adapt to each implement, each scenario. So I think that's a great, great way to approach it for sure. Now, I know we don't have a ton of time left, and there's like a million things we could talk about. I could be here all day going through this with you. I want to get into some more of the tactical stuff. So we talked about, kind of programming a little bit before, kind of lightly, your approach to strength. How about, we talked about nutrition a little bit, the other time of the day, outside the gym? How do you set yourself up to be as strong as possible when it comes to things like recovery, mobility? You mentioned foot health and things like that. Let's touch on some of that stuff so we can get viewers as much value as humanly possible.
For sure. So, of course, we're in the weight room training for only a couple hours of the day. We have all these other hours in our day. Yes. How do we optimize our training? You have to appreciate that training is a stressful task. So if you ride that concept of just always being stressed all the time, you're going to be burnt out. So a big part of it is have a good mental state. Have your moments of peace. When you're not training, don't always listen to angry music or those things matter. Have good thoughts.
Right.
to the best of your ability. That stuff actually matters. A healthy mindset. And that's from the mental aspect. If you can go outside and be in nature, that's great. Anything that's gonna, But then from a physical standpoint for recovery, foot health, of course, is one of my go-tos. I wear toe spacers that literally they spread my toes. They're like $40 on Amazon. Different companies sell them,
Right.
and that promotes blood flow in my feet. I'm huge on having foot health.
Wow.
If you can have healthy feet, that's honestly kind of where my 900-pound deadlift comes from. Is I have healthy feet when my feet can interact again well with the floor,
Right.
and then I can utilize more of my entire body. Everything comes from your feet. That's your brain's point of contact with the floor,
Right.
and your perception of your center of gravity and where you are in time and space. So a lot of times people don't appreciate your feet get beat up. I roll out my feet with a golf ball every single day,
Wow.
especially before training. Rolling out with a golf ball promotes that foot health, again, that proprioception, awareness, and time and space. I can't say enough things about how it is to have foot health. People wear shoes that really cram your toes together.
Right.
That prevents blood flow and that really inhibits your use of your foot. That can affect your perception of where you are in space. That influences your posture negatively.
Right.
All that crazy stuff. But then, so that's foot health. I also do a lot of breathing exercises. So breathing exercises to help switch your nervous system to that calm, rest, and digest state.
Yep.
And pretty much breathing exercises to adjust posture. So adjusting posture, adjusting that mental state that I talked about earlier, and all these non-traditional things that you wouldn't expect, but they really bring everything full circle.
Yeah, no, I love that. And that's the complete package, right? It's like you get to do these things in the gym and post these crazy lifts and whatever, but people don't really necessarily understand or know or appreciate how much goes into the rest of the time. I call it the negative space. When you're not in the room pulling the weights and doing your thing, what happens in the negative space, in that off time? But these are some great lessons people can learn. And I love the stuff of hey, breath work, get out in nature. It's that yin and yang. Training is inherently stressful. There's a lot of stress that comes with that, but you need to balance it out with something else. And I think too is, if you're just inundating yourself all the time with that high stimulus, all you're worried about is training, thinking about it, it takes a lot of the fun out of it. And what are the things you do most in your life? The things you have fun with, right? So I think that's a very important part of it as well. So Nick, we're coming up to the end of our time here. It's been a super blast getting to talk to you. Where can people find you if they want to learn more from you, they want to train with you, become a client, something like that? How can they find you?
Yeah, I think a couple easy places. I have a website. It's my name, Nick Hadge, Hadge, strength.com. So nickhadgestrength.com. I'm on Instagram with my brother. It's Hadge, Hadge _brothers. I think those are pretty much the two best places.
Awesome. Well, fantastic. Nick, thank you for coming on the show. It was awesome to talk to you, get to share all these wonderful insights. And for those of you watching, make sure you go check Nick and his brother out. They are America's strongest brothers, so you don't want to miss a beat. Go check them out, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Real Results.